Hello guys, welcome to our channel. We post amazing revenge stories daily. Today's first story is posted by you/Kveldson. Evil stepfather gets what he deserves. When I was 15, my mom started dating a man she met on a dating website. I didn't like him the first time I met him, and 2 months later he moved into the house. About 3 weeks after he moved in, he took my skateboards, self-built halfpipe, ramps, BMX bike, ice hockey gear, and many other things to the dump one day while I was at school. He said he did this because he didn't want all of my crap cluttering up his garage. Maybe 2 months later he punched me in the stomach for the first time because I got up from the dinner table without asking to be excused. From there it escalated into full-fledged beatdowns for the smallest perceived slight to his authority. One day he decided to take my extensive Pokemon card collection, even more extensive comic book collection, my Game Boy and PS2 with all the assorted games, and my fantasy and sci-fi book collection, and got rid of it all because 15-year-old boys should be playing football and baseball, not being a nerd playing with Pokemon cards and reading comics and books. I would like to add that he was a middle school teacher, and in his off time refereed and umpired local middle and high school sports games. My mom never intervened, and in fact acquiesced when he demanded that she stop giving me lunch money, because the little shit will just spend it on comics and other gay shit. One day, I took maybe $3 and change out of his change jar so that I could buy a slice of pizza and some fruit punch during lunch at school, because I was tired of being hungry. My twin sister was always a bit of an asshole, and frequently blackmailed me into doing her chores from a young age. I was fed up and refused to do something, so she told him what I had done. This man actually called the police and pressed a larceny charge against me, and once the police had left, proceeded to beat me senseless. At that point I ran away. When the cops found me and returned me to my home, I found out that he had been trying to talk my mom into sending me away to military school or something of that nature. I ran away again, and between having run away several times and the larceny charge, ended up turning 16 in juvenile detention. I spent the next couple years miserable and afraid, frequently contemplating suicide. Once I was out on my own, I didn't speak to my mom for several years. We eventually reconciled, and by that point they had married. I was a lot bigger than I had been as a young teenager, and had gotten into weightlifting, so he no longer acted like he was going to punch me to make me flinch, much less actually hit me, and we basically avoided each other for the most part. My mother found out that she had stage 4 cancer, and no longer wanted to waste any of the time she had left with him, so she had a lawyer draft up a separation agreement whereby he would receive a set amount of money upon separation, and would have 45 days to retrieve his belongings from the house. He had spent his entire inheritance in 6 months and then had to sell his mother's house that he grew up in order to settle his debts shortly before they started dating, and my mother bought the house back from the bank before they married. She allowed him to keep the house and he moved back into his mother's house. My mother passed away about 9 months after their separation, and despite the agreement had been allowing him to come and get his stuff piecemeal. I put an immediate end to that. He was past the deadline to remove his personal effects, and they were now legally mine to dispose of as I saw fit. I sold his baseball card collection, around $14,000, and his autographed sports memorabilia, roughly $11,000, and also sold all of his woodworking equipment, along with several finished pieces of furniture that he had made, $6,500 I think. I kept his mother's engagement ring, platinum band, 3 diamonds roughly 2 carats, wedding band, his coin collection. I also collect coins, and some tools and other odds and ends. Now comes the real fun. Around a month ago I finally saw him at the grocery store. As he was leaving I approached him. I told him I had sold his collections as he was pushing his cart out towards his car. He reacted exactly as I expected. He took a swing at me multiple times. I already had my phone ready to dial 911. Several of these punches missed, and the ones that did connect didn't have much effect because he's nowhere near as strong as he was 20 years ago in his 40s, and I no longer a skinny little 15-year-old. He continued to try to punch me as I spoke to the 911 operator, and was actively ramming his grocery cart into my new Toyota as the police officers pulled into the parking lot. He was arrested for assault, communicating threats, and destruction of property. As a result he lost his job and pension at the local middle school, and because he had never learned how to save money while married to my somewhat wealthy mother, ended up having to sell his mother's house because he hired an expensive lawyer thinking he could somehow beat the charges. My nephew, who who was on the football team, made it well known to his friends that he not only had just been arrested and convicted of assault as well as other charges, but that he had also beat me as a child, causing several parents to call for him to resign from refereeing and umpiring for local sports games. My niece and my girlfriend's much younger sister are enrolled at the middle school where he worked, and say that he was not only universally disliked, but when he came up to the school to get his belongings, he made a big scene and ended up hysterically crying as he was leaving. At least that's what they've heard from the kids who were attending summer school at the time. His son, who he was equally abusive towards as a child, refused to take him in or help him out, so the abusive stepfather ended up having to take a job as a cashier at Walmart so that he could afford the rent on his crappy little trailer in an absolutely awful neighborhood. Even though that Walmart is not the closest Walmart to my house, that is now the only place where I go grocery shopping or to purchase anything that I need. I purposely stand in line longer than I need to just so that he can be the one who has the pleasure of ringing up my purchases. The first time I went through his line, he attempted to ring up multiple items more than one time to overcharge me, and when I called him on it, he said that I was mistaken. I asked for a manager, and the manager believed him that it was an accident, but he learned that he can't get away with that. The second time, I made sure to be as nice as possible and had to ask for a manager because he was overwhelmingly rude. The people in line behind me backed me up and he got in some trouble for that. Every time I go there and step into line, I see him die a little bit inside, and it gives me such satisfaction. Sometimes I'll say that I'm paying with exact change, and as I'm about to hand him the money I'll say, "Oh, I didn't realize I had rare coin from his collection in my pocket. I guess I'll use my credit card. I just sold his expensive ratcheting wrench set, and so on Monday when he works again I'm going to go buy my daughter one of their better above-ground pools, and as he's ringing it out tell him, I know that daughter is just going to love this pool. It's not like I would have ever used those expensive ratcheting wrenches anyway." TLDR, a-hole stepfather got rid of all of my prized possessions as a child and beat the crap out of me regularly. I ended up getting all of his prized possessions and selling most of them, and when I told him, he tried to assault me in public, which resulted in criminal charges, losing his job, and his house. Now I get to see him all the time and rub his nose in it. Here are some comments. First commenter: "Holy shit. Karma is a witch, hahaha." Second commenter: "That was a long one but absolutely worth the read. 10OUOF10 well done mate." Third commenter: "Your story gave me hope that one day my abusive stepfather will get the same fate. So sorry you had to deal with all that growing up. He will die alone and miserable." Fourth commenter: "I just love these stories because when OP gets their revenge it gives me a big satisfaction inside and makes me feel amazingly. It's so awesome." Fifth commenter: "I wish this could happen to all abusive parents. Hopefully one day I'll be able to celebrate something equally satisfying and destructive towards mine." Last commenter: "How on earth did your mother let him beat you? How could she let him call police over a change? How could she choose him over her own son? You have a big loving heart if you were able to forgive her." Now getting ahead to our final story, posted by you/SonDon'tPlay. Don't wanna let me tinker? Alrightly then, let's do business then. My grandpa was a successful man, and in his mid-60s, he decided he wanted to take a step back, so he started selling off his businesses. He sold his various businesses and spent the next few years traveling. As he approached 70, he got bored in addition to a few new grandchildren, so he needed a bigger house. He sold the old home that he had bought after he got back from Vietnam and bought this massive house on this large piece of land. This property also came with a massive steel barn looked like this. Not sure if he had ever told anyone about his plans, but right after he got the property he dumped a ton of money into tools and equipment and converted his barn into a mechanic's dream. Some things I remember having. He had a professional lift, capable of lifting full-size trucks. He had those professional oil catchers you see at Quick Lubes. He had a dedicated air compressor system that was designed to power all his power tools. He had a tire machine to mount new tires. He had so much equipment. His tool corner was a massive corner of this massive barn. His plan? To fix cars, especially for people in need. He lived in a rural community. If you didn't have a car, that was a big problem. So he let everyone know at his local church that he was willing to work on their cars if they provided the parts. He only took a few jobs a week. He was doing this to enjoy himself and help those that needed it. He'd of course change oil, change the transmission fluid and all kinds of various repairs. My grandpa was a talented mechanic. However, he kept the amount of work limited. He was also selective. If you were in need, he'd want to fix your cars. If you had the means to pay, he'd decline and ask you to go elsewhere. One day the owner of the local car dealership came by and told my grandpa he needed to stop fixing other people's cars cause he wasn't properly licensed, didn't have the proper insurances, and was hurting his business. My grandpa explained this is just his hobby, he only does a few cars a week. The owner told him he needs to cut it out, or he's going to sue my grandpa out of business. My grandpa said he laughed over this. What business was this guy going to sue him out of? The owner walked out. A little while later my grandpa got served. He was being sued by the owner of the car dealership. My grandpa thought he'd take a trip down to the dealership and try and reason with the man. My grandpa hoped he could come to an understanding. My grandpa spoke to the owner and basically explained. He only works on people cars who are down on their luck. The fact is the people cars he fixes probably couldn't afford to pay a professional dealership to fix their vehicle. He only does a few cars a week. He's not all that interested in getting into a fight over his hobby, but he ain't going back down. Well, they ended up in court. By this point, my grandpa had hired a lawyer, who was able to get the city to approve a commercial garage on his property. It helped that he lived on the outskirts of town, and had 6 acres of property. The court told my grandpa his auto repair shop is operating illegally. If my grandpa wants to continue, he's going to need to get a business license, get the proper insurances, and if he does that, he will be good to go. Now, what do you think a man who has nothing but time and money in this situation is going to do? He's going to get his business license and insurances, of course. Which he did, and that surprised no one, but he went further. Got a dedicated phone line, ran into his shop, hired a full-time mechanic. Put up a professional sign, set up a little waiting area with a water cooler. What shocked everyone even more? He ran a local TV ad, saying he was a pay-what-you-can mechanic shop, reservations only. Put ads in the local paper, saying the same thing. Yes, folks, that's right, my grandpa is not only a licensed, legal auto repair business, he has a certified mechanic on his payroll, and he's running ads. As for his prices, they were quite simple. You either bring the parts yourself, and pay the mechanic whatever you wanted. Mechanic got a separate wage from my grandpa, so if you couldn't pay anything, that was fine. Had my grandpa sourced the parts, he'd charge at you parts and you'd pay the mechanic whatever you want. My grandpa started taking jobs, and boy did that shop gets busy. It was impossible to beat grandpa's price. Grandpa was essentially paying to fix your car for you. My grandpa would spend his days with the mechanic that he had hired working on cars. He loved it. The owner of the local car dealership was furious. He sued my grandpa again. They went to court and the judge basically said my grandpa owned a licensed, insured, auto repair business. What he charges his customers for his services is completely up to him. Even if that means doing the work for free. About a year or so later, my grandpa gets a call from a lawyer who says he's representing a potential buyer of the local car dealership. However, the buyer wants to speak to my grandpa. My grandpa agreed. He sat down with the new potential buyer who expressed his concerns about buying the dealership. Service is a major profit center for a dealership, and he's considering buying the local dealership. However, he doesn't want to buy the dealership if my grandpa is going to keep operating the way he is, cause it's impossible for a for-profit business to compete against someone selling their services for free. My grandpa agrees that there's no way someone looking to make a profitable business could ever compete against him. So they came to an agreement. The owner buys the dealership and my grandpa would only work on a few cars a week, maybe 5 to 6. Only work on people cars who are down on their luck and probably too poor to be able to pay a professional dealership to fix their car. Any parts he needs he will buy from the dealership. Any work he declined, he'd refer to the dealership. The new owner of the dealership agreed to. Dealership must agree to let my grandpa stay out of his way. Dealership must hire his mechanic. They shook hands. The local dealership was bought out, and for the next 9 years my grandpa would fix people's cars who were down on their luck. If he had to buy parts, he'd buy from the dealership, and as for that mechanic, my grandpa hired. He ended up becoming the service manager and did quite well for himself. As for my grandpa, when he was 80 he had a heart attack in his shop. Luckily one of his grandkids was there and they got him to the hospital and he made a full recovery. But the doctor told him his body couldn't handle working in that garage anymore. He ended up shutting down after that. For the next 3 years he looked out his kitchen window staring at his shop, remembering all the fun he had in his garage. He passed away at 83, surrounded by friends and family. TLDR, grandpa just wanted to fix some cars. The local dealership got mad at him cause he was crushing them, sued him. My grandpa got serious, put them out of business, and made a deal with the new owner of the dealership that he would still operate, but at a level that the owner could still make a profit so long as they let my grandpa be. Here are some comments. First commenter: I love thinking that the shop owner probably had to sell cheap because of the slow business Gramps put him in. Second commenter: that was a lovely read, thank you for that. Your grandpa sounds like a great person. Third commenter: love that his revenge was so helpful for the community, wholesome per revenge. Fourth comment: as someone who has lost his grandfather in the last 2 weeks, I really appreciated your story. Your grandpa was a top bloke. This is the end of today's video. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked it, please don't forget to hit the like button and comment below. If you don't want to miss such more videos, please don't forget to subscribe us.